Powered by Sports Interaction, Canada Sportsbook.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Game Over Winnipeg. My name is Lyss, one of your regular hosts. I'm joined by Brody today. Brody Jackson, for those of you who are Winnipeg market people, you understand that I am joined by a local celebrity today. So, Brody, thank you so much for taking the time to come and join me this evening to talk about whatever that was.
Yeah. No, happy to be here. I'm only a local celebrity in my mom's eyes, but thanks. I appreciate it.
No, for those of
Uh,
us who are slow pitch and hockey fans and country music fans, you're kind of a big deal over here. So.
can we just do 45 minutes on slow pitch? Like we can talk about that. Like I'm in for sure. Uh, that was a bummer of an outcome of a game. It was such a weird game list. Like it was like they dominated for the majority of the game. It just doesn't seem right. They were walking away going, did we just lose that game? Did that just happen?
Right. No, exactly. And it's like you look at it and you're like, it was it was kind of fun. Like if you could take out like the couple seconds where the goals happen and you just stitch the rest of the game together, I probably would have been like, wow, that was a lot of fun to watch if I didn't know what the outcome was going to be and where the goals happen and stuff. But it was a weird game.
Yeah, it was you had these sways of momentum that didn't really feel like sways of momentum because it would be like the Jets were putting on pressure. Whether it was, at the end of the first period. I mean, it took them a while to seem to get going and firing on all cylinders like we know they can do. And those crisp passes weren't quite there at the beginning of the first period. But once they got going in that offensive zone, they were hard to knock off the puck. And you could see it through the end of the first period, the majority of the second, and then again, a majority of the third. They just dominated. And then if you're looking at those sways of momentum, it's like they carried it the entire game. And then all of a sudden, one bad bounce or one just missed opportunity or missed play, and it would end up behind Connor Hellebuck. And it's not like he sat there and had you could point a lot of the goals on him either. That's the funny part too. It was like tip shots, good, nice, accurate shooting up to the top cheddar. Like it was weird just that nothing seemed to be working in the Jets' favor. It was like they worked really, really hard to try and get the win, and it was just not going to go their way tonight.
No, literally, like exactly, like especially when it comes to at least looking at the score sheet when it was like they're in a deficit and you're like, oh gosh, they're never gonna get out of this, and all of a sudden they'd score that goal to cut the lead, and you're like, okay, maybe this is gonna happen, and then they give up another one, like you said, one of those bad bounce, weird. Whose fault is it? I don't really know. Like just a lot of that. It was strange. It was definitely weird. But like you were saying, there was a lot of that possession. You thought it looked like the Jets, carried a lot of that. Which line did you think was more fun tonight? The Dubois line or
Well,
the Scheifele line?
oh man, that Dubois he's just a beast. Like, how do you knock that guy off the puck? He's such a fun player to watch when he's in the zone like that, and he's just dominant, and you can see the chemistry. Like we gotta all remember that, as good as they are looking right now, they're only gonna get better. Wheeler's played what, 3 games until he was injured and gone for the majority of the season, so they're only gonna get better. And Wheeler's confidence with those two players is only going to get better. You could see a couple missed passes, whether it was like just off by a foot, that those are things that I think will be clicking on all cylinders. And, by more than likely by the All-Star game, even with all the games that they have still coming up yet before that break. So that Dubois line is it's 3 very unique players all playing together, whether you're looking at fly or the goal scoring ability of Connor or just the pure physical dominance of Dubois. They're just such a fun line to watch.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you're so right about Dubois. Like, I don't know. He's an interesting player. And I got to say, guys, this week I was able to, Brody, I always put up my jersey of the game for the player that I want to feature because I thought that they had a fun game. And this is my first time featuring my newly signed Pierre-Luc Dubois jersey from the skills competition this week. So
I thought I saw you post something about that you got, yeah, PLD signed your jersey. Well, speaking of which, wasn't he fantastic at the skills competition? If you look at all the players that were involved, at the skills comp. He was probably the one that was most active in signing for
Oh
fans.
my gosh. Yeah, no, it was nuts. Like, it was so fun. So I had never been to the skills competition before. My friend's like, we should go. And she's like, if you want to go, you have to get good seats. So we were sitting in the second row. And it was actually a ton of fun because I was just chucking hats and jerseys for kids back and forth because the kids who are sitting a couple rows back, they're not getting anything. And they're screaming these players' names. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I see that you have an Adam Lowry jersey. I'm going to make sure you get that Adam Lowry jersey signed by Adam Lowry. And it was a ton of fun. Dubois definitely gave me a bit of a chuckle when I threw him a Dubois number 13 jersey. He's like, what? But so that was a ton of fun. Brody was the in-game guy for that. He had his mic out there. He had his skates on. Was that a fun experience or what?
It's such a blast. I mean, it's fun to see the camaraderie between the players too. Like this hasn't happened in a couple of years, and I mean, obviously the best thing that come out of it is to see a lot of these kids, like you had mentioned, Lyss, they get an opportunity to see NHL players because they never had an opportunity to see them before. And when you can get up close and personal and see a lot of the personality of the players come out, like you're well aware that, Nate Schmidt is a funny guy, that he is an engaging guy, that he's going to be a fan favorite because of the stuff that he's willing to talk about and how he's willing to chirp everybody and have a great old time. You're well aware of that. But something like the skills competition gets you an inside look a little bit more like Connor Hellebuck when he approaches the microphone and wants to chat and, give praise to the two local goaltenders who are in there playing the student goalies. Like you get an inside look at the players who are on their ice, and then you also get a chance to see their skills. Like when you are standing on the ice and you see it up close and personal, you're like, what they're doing just doesn't make sense at times. There's the puck control relay, and for those who haven't been to the skills competition, it's run by Murray Cobb and the fantastic crew with the Jets Academy. So what they do is in the puck control relay, there's a sauce competition where you have the player on one of the teams has to sauce it over top of like this rubber padding that's about this long, and then score into these teeny tiny nets that are like 1.5 feet, and that's about it. And I've never seen anybody do it as quickly as Mark Scheifele in my life this last time. He did 4 out of 5. I was actually chatting with Ron, one of the student goaltenders, when this was happening. And I was talking to him, and he's like, was that the quickest you've ever seen it? I said, by far. Like, I've never seen it. I think he did 4 out of 5 he got in. That's insane that he can sauce the puck that far down into this teeny tiny net. And he did 4 out of 5. And Dylan DeMello standing there, he's like, no, Brody, they did 4 out of 6. Just want to correct you on that one. 4 out of 6. So, but he said, but he also added in the fact that he's like, yeah, that is ridiculous. Like it's so hard to do. So when you get a chance to see the players, really do certain little specific parts of their game that we really take for granted, that you get a chance to see up close and personal like that, it's a pretty special thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was pretty cool, and I think the personality thing definitely shone through. And I think it's great that you mentioned that because, like you said, some of them are pretty evident, like the Nate Schmitz of the world. But Brendan Dillon had a smile on his face the whole time, and all these different guys. It was awesome. It was great. And I want to ask of the Mark Scheifele, particularly. He mentioned those little soft skills and stuff. What did you think of his game tonight?
He had a good game. Again, it just seemed like there's certain pucks that just weren't going their way. Like that line itself, actually, that was probably Wheeler's best game that he's had since he's returned from his injury,
yeah.
right? So, and the other hard part about it too is that you got to give Scheif props in the fact that it's not just one guy returning to the line. This is 2 guys returning to the line. As Perfetti was out for a while, so when you are putting 2 players back into your line, and he was mix and match with so many players here during that period of so many injuries. He's getting 2 guys back in the lineup who are just starting to find their legs, and Perfetti looked great tonight too.
Yeah.
As did Wheeler. Like this is Wheeler's. It'll take you a while to get going after an injury like that, and now it seems like they got their legs underneath them. It just certain bounces weren't going their way. But Scheif is, when he's a driven player, he's just a fun, solid player to watch as well. And I thought he had a good game. And that's the hard part about coming out of a game like tonight. It's not like I can't even, if I was to sit there and go, who's the player of the game? I would probably say a guy who you didn't see put it into the net, and that would be Josh Morrissey. But outside of that, it's like they all played decent enough that they could all be considered good players in the game. But for some reason, everything went wrong. Even Neil Pionk, who, unfortunately that puck bounced over his stick, and that was pretty much the end of the day after that goal. but he had a chance to tie the game there, ringing it off the post. He had the goal that he scored earlier in the game. So it's like you can't even pin all that. Adam Lowry had an unreal first period. Him and Morgan Barron look like another duo like Adam Lowry's always done when it comes to, Armia or Cop or now Morgan Barron. He looked like Adam Lowry was having a great game. And then he makes one mistake and it costs him, right?
On the PK there, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like everyone was playing a good game and it was just one mistake that seemed to cost them.
Totally, yeah. Like, I think it's the kind of thing that I'd actually like to go back and rewatch some of the clips, particularly with those first couple of lines, because I thought the generation was a lot stronger than I've seen in a lot of other games. Like, there have been some games this year I found the team has been, defensively sound, and they're clearing the puck well, and their entries and their exits are fine, but then they're not cycling properly, or the puck's not getting in front of the net, or they have no player to pot those rebounds. Like, I thought all of that stuff was actually pretty good tonight. So like you said, it's weird looking at the result and seeing how frustrated you are, but also how you can pull a couple of good things from that,
Yeah, I would imagine it being frustrating for the players.
Yeah.
Because it just seemed like they wanted to win that one. And it honestly looked like they were doing everything that they could to try and win it. And whether it was a good save or a post or a crossbar that got in the way or a blocked shot, it just seemed like it didn't matter what they were going to do tonight. They just weren't going to win that game. It just felt like everything was against them.
Totally. And I think that kind of it speaks to a good comment we have in the chat here from Jeff. It says the fact that they kept putting pressure on despite being down, you would never have seen that from previous years' Jets teams. And I think that's interesting because, yeah, like the deficit came so early. They were chasing that entire game, but I really didn't think they ever let their foot off the gas, which I think is huge. And those are the kinds of things that you can pull from a game like that and look at it in an encouraging light, right? Because it's like they were chasing that entire game, but they weren't, the Jets that we occasionally see where they're down by 3 and they just give up,
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're seeing that a lot more this year than years prior. And I got to ask Jeff, like, flip side of it, isn't it fun as a fan going in there and saying, knowing that, okay, they're down by 2 goals, but they're probably going to come back. They're down by 3 goals, but there's a good chance that they could still come back. And as a fan, how often have you thought that over the past, few years? There's been some struggles, and you're just like, I don't know if they got it in. It's going to be tough. That's a big mountain to climb back. And now you're like, actually, it's a little bit of a hill, and I think they can get to the top of it, no problem, because it's just the team that they are.
No, exactly. And I think I'm looking up in the chat, and Dave early on says, what is the point of Kuhlman again? And I think I want to talk a little bit about the bottom 6 as well. Like, I think the top 6, they did a pretty good job of some generation tonight. I made some notes early on that I'm like, every time they're behind their own blue line, I cover my eyes because they stress me out a little bit. But there were some interesting illnesses and lineup decisions that plagued this team kind of at the last second tonight. We know that this bottom 6 has been rotating through guys. We've had a lot of strong players come through and fill in roles as needed with injuries and all that kind of stuff. Any particular thoughts? Obviously, Kevin Stenlund coming out of the lineup and David Gustafsson coming back in after 2 games as a healthy scratch. Any particular thoughts on the bottom 6 tonight beyond? I know we kind of touched a little bit on Adam Lowry's first period already. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think, like Stenlund wouldn't have been out of this game if he wasn't sick. Like he's been playing unreal, and I think you're going to rotate those bottom 6 players no matter what, more likely anyways. Like we saw it earlier with Sam Gagner coming out, but then you put him back in, he scores a goal. And not to say that he hasn't been out here the last few games, but prior to that, they brought him out. The thing with rotating at the bottom 6, and with so many injuries that happen, and that's the one thing with Kuhlman is that he comes over and he's thrust into the top line. So as a fan, if you're a fan of the Jets and you're watching the team and you're just wanting this guy to produce because they're like, he's on the top line, he's playing with Shipe, now you got these chances, you should be putting them in. He had a lot of chances. He just he just wasn't bearing those chances when he was up there on the top line. But can you imagine, like you're generally a third line, fourth line player, you come over to a new team and boom, you're playing top line minutes. It's unfortunate, but it was just the battle that the Jets were facing. And whether they were rolling in the Easymont or Kuhlman or bringing any of the Barron, whoever was coming up to play that first line minutes, they were just kind of being thrust into a spot that maybe they weren't ready for. And coming over to a new team too, like coming over to a new team right to the top line, like that's hard to do. You're not going to be an immediate Andrew Kopp here coming over, and then you can, go from the third line to the top line, and it doesn't feel like the team is missing a beat. This is an entirely new player and a new team. So I feel like Kuhlman is just a matter of like giving him a little bit more time. He's driven. He's a little pest in there. I think that, getting bottom 6 minutes will be good. Maybe he'll be put down in towards, just what's going to happen when Menelainen's back, right? He's probably going to be going down to the fourth line and playing fourth line minutes because Menelainen's going to be back up there on the third line. You got one of the strongest, most powerful third lines in the entire league with those three big boys on there between Barron, Lowry, and Menelainen. Now all of a sudden Kuhlman's being down into the fourth line, and that's probably where he'll fit perfectly. So right now, once these injuries are through and everything's outside of their system, then I feel like you'll be able to critique that bottom six a lot more when the bottom six are playing like the bottom six, not being thrust into top line minutes and Moose coming up to play those bottom line minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of honestly relates to sort of what we saw with some of the top six too, with the guys coming back from injury, when the chemistry and the sync and the synergies just aren't there immediately. Just those little bounces are so much more noticeable. And I think you're right that, someone who is literally put on waivers by another NHL team is obviously not a long-term solution in the top six. So he's probably not used to playing with the Mark Scheifele's of the world. He's not used to playing under Rick Bowness. All these changes coming in at once and still just trying to get used to all those changes. I agree. Like, I think eventually he will, like, he's been sliding down the lineup to a spot that's more, what he's made for and what he's fit for. That being said, when Menelainen comes back, does he even stay in the lineup? Because that means, because Kevin Stenlund's also coming back, that's not long term. Does Gus go out? Does AJF come out? I'm very interested to see what's going to happen there.
And isn't it fun to have that kind of dialogue about
so
the
much
bottom
better
six?
than previous
We
years.
we haven't had that over so long, and it's fun to sit there and go like, okay, Sam Gagner was a depth signing, and not a lot of conversation had with him, and then he comes on and he puts up important goals here and there in 12 minutes of work. You have this depth forwards now where we're like, oh, this is kind of fun to debate whether Fialbi should be in there over a guy like Stenlund or Gustus. This is his opportunity. He should have this opportunity right now, and he deserves to roll with it. But look at all the penalty killing he can do. Look at the defensive play he can have. He did put up points with the Moose. There's only a matter of time till he gets there. So it's fun to have it. Each one of these players has an argument to stay in the lineup, but there's also an argument to probably pull them out too when there's another player that's ready to step up and get in there.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's also a bit of a similar conversation to a lesser degree just because you're running with half the active players in the roster, but with the defense as well. And looking at, Kevin Stenlund was sidelined by an illness today, and it looks like, I guess, Ville Heinola was too. I guess everyone was under the impression this morning that he was going to play and that Dylan Sandberg was going to be a healthy scratch, and then there was a last-minute switch just due to an illness thing there. What do you think is going to happen there? I guess, everyone's healthy now. Ville Heinola sat for the games that Nate Schmidt's been back, but it looked like they were going to give him a crack today. Any thoughts on that particular situation?
Well, that's a tough one. That's a I don't ever envy coaches who have to be in this situation, but that's why they're paid money to be the coaches and make those kinds of decisions. Because, it's funny. I'll sit around a group of people and they'll be sitting there pumping the tires of Ville Heinola like nobody's business. And then you go to another group and it's the exact opposite. Right. And it's all of us have our own personal opinions as to who we think should be in that top six. But I will tell you one thing that I think Sandberg's going to just continue to grow. And I think that you got to continue to give him opportunity to grow. It was just a couple of years ago that in the playoffs, I honestly thought, as a very, very young Jet, I honestly thought that he was their best defenseman in that playoff series. And I think that he's just going to get there and he's going to continue to grow. It's just a stable defenseman, not somebody who's going to wow you, but somebody who can play the body. And eventually, I think that he's going to start shooting the puck a little bit more. We're seeing that a little bit more this season than we did in prior seasons. So I'm a fan of Sandberg. I think that he has a lot of opportunity there. We saw him in the skills competition. He was hitting some bangers, Lyss. Like he was slapping that. He could hit that puck, So I think it's just a matter of time before Sandberg will kind of improve. And that's the hard part when you have so many kind of talented young defensemen is how do you integrate them in a lineup when you have it's just a glut of them in a way, when Logan Stanley's back. you got him as well in entering into the conversation. So it's a tough one. I don't envy anybody having that one. And I know that if I have one opinion about it, it's going to be completely different than yours and completely different from somebody else's, depending on the taste that you like of your defenseman. Like I've seen people sit there shredding a certain one defenseman, and then just giving praise to another one. And then on the flip side, the exact opposite from one of their best buddies. Everybody's got that different opinion about a defenseman. It's a hard one to really nail down.
Totally, yeah, no, and I think it's the kind of thing where all I can ask for, I think, when it comes to people with the way they evaluate defensemen is a little bit of consistency. So that's why, like tonight, for example, I've been ragging on Neil Pionk all year. I've just been struggling with a couple of things I've seen from him. I don't know. And then obviously tonight there was that giveaway and people started flaming the guy. But I was like, you know what? No. My big thing is I'm like, I don't like using isolated plays to evaluate a player because it's not really reflective of the entirety of the game or even, a stretch of games and all that kind of stuff. But all that's to say, it really depends on how you look at them. And I fully agree with you. And I think it's a good segue into a question that we have from Next Gen in the chat who says, what do you think Cheveldayoff should target at the deadline, if anything? And I think that's where the Jets having those tough conversations of who slots into the lineup will work to their advantage, because if you have all these guys that can play on your competitive NHL team, that means you have all the more trade chips. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's kind of tough because when you're around the team all the time, you never want to see anybody go, right? So when you think of somebody coming in, you're like, oh, that means that somebody's got to go. But you're also like, okay, well, I want the team to get better, obviously, and improve, as does the team itself. So, the way that I look at it is that I think that if they can get anybody in as a top 4 D-man, is probably the best thing that they can do for the team. Somebody who is a big body in the back that plays top 4 minutes. The Jets are just a little smaller on the blue line, and that's nothing to take away from Stanley or Dylan. Dylan's probably the hardest nosed player that they have on the team. And Stanley's a big boy, but he doesn't always play the body. I think it'd be nice to have somebody back there who is just a tough, hard nosed guy that you can sit there and put on in the last 2 minutes of a game when they're leading by a goal and there's an empty net. That's just that tough player back there that is defensively sound. They have offensive guys, and if you look at Josh Morrison, you look at Neil Pionk, and I know a lot of people do and have been ragging on Pionk, as you mentioned. Listen, I love that you're honest about it. He's just a couple seasons away from one heck of a hockey season that he played for the Jets, and he was their best defenseman. And now we're looking at Morrissey going, okay, well, there's nobody better than Morrissey, but Morrissey was just a couple seasons away from having a not so great season. Seasons come and go, and players can change depending on how the season is operating, how things are going their way, what injuries that they're dealing with that we have no idea about. I'd be hard pressed to sit there and say that that Pionk is, he's not having a great season, but that he's as bad as what is being made out to be. I think that there's a lot in him to give. It's just a matter of going, okay, well, do we need the offensive abilities of Josh Morrissey, Neil Pionk, Ville Heinola, all, or do we need somebody who is going to be tough and can play those hard minutes on the blue line?
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I want to disagree in saying that my first target would be more offense, but as a forward. But I think that there's a conversation to be had for that as well. Like, I know what you mean. Like, and especially in a game like the one that we watched tonight, like, someone who can defend would have been great, because none of them really did that tonight. So I definitely, my opinion can be swayed when I watch this team. And I feel like every game I change a little bit. Like in a night like tonight, I've been yelling about getting in a top 6 forward pretty much all year. And tonight, that wasn't what it looked like they needed in any capacity. So, but if it's changing night in, night out, then you're like, oh my gosh, what do they do? And again, I don't envy the job of a GM, because it's like, how do you know? But, yeah, I think in the chat, Brady's saying that he doesn't know if that type of D-man is available, and I think that that's a good point, too. Like, I've seen so many names circling around, and I feel like the defense market for free agents at the deadline, it doesn't nearly look like it did last year. Like, can you imagine, like, giving up what Florida did for Ben Sherratt last year and bringing him back? And that's not where I'm about to head.
That's the thing. It's going to be costly. Like, because everybody wants that top 4 D-man, and that Edmonton's going to be spending everything that they can in order to get a top
Oh
four D.
yeah.
It's going to be so competitive on the market for a top four D man. You're not right, Brady. Like it's going to be so hard to find that. But you also know that come playoff time, should the Jets, knock on wood, make it to the playoffs, they're going to be driving into Helly like nobody's business, right? They're going to be up in his grill. They're going to be sitting in the crease. They're going to be playing tough. And that's when it gets to playoff hockey, when you get to that, that rise and grind every single day that you play, that's when those big bodied defensemen become important. And I mean, we can all sit here and remember the glory days of Dustin Byfuglien in front of the net. But if you have somebody who's even a foot taller, a foot smaller, and 60 pounds lighter, you're still looking at a big guy back there. And that's what I think that they need, is just somebody to be able to just dummy people and get out of my way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's, I'm really glad you made the comment about Logan Stanley, because that's one thing that drives me nuts is when people are like, oh, he's big, so he hits guys. I'm like, no, he doesn't. The use of the body is extremely ineffective from that player, but thank you so much for bringing that up. But I do think that whole playoff hockey perspective is huge, because, those checks that I get frustrated when players finish right now, I'm like, you just hit that guy, but you took yourself out of the play and you didn't get the puck, so what was the point? Those are the hits that matter when you get to the playoffs and you're playing the same team, 7 times in 13 days or whatever it is and stuff like that. So I think it's important to kind of look at the longevity of the team. And I think you made a good point about Connor Hellebuyck, because like we saw tonight, the guy's a brick wall, but every now and then the brick wall, like tonight, again, Hellebuyck is not for fault. Mike had a comment in the chat. He said the net is big save Daves from here on out. I know he's being a jokester, but he's human too, and in games when the odd goal that he normally wouldn't let in gets let in, the flaws of other players in the team are a little bit more noticeable.
Oh, they always will be, because it's just, hell, he's just that good, and he's bad. I mean, he's going to be that team's MVP for as long as he's around, just because of, we are so darn lucky to have him. It's like, we really are, and I hope that I hope that people get to, even in tough times, if the Jets go on a slide and people are all up in arms, and I get it, because as a fan you want to see your team win. I hope that we all realize still how lucky we are to have a goalie like Helly playing for our team, and how fun it is, and how lucky we are to have a player like Josh Morrissey putting on the show that he was again tonight. Like there's just certain players that are fun to watch, and we got two. And I mean, arguably, there's more if you look up front. But we got two that I would sit there right now that are like, they're so ridiculously fun to watch, and that is Connor Hellebuyck and Josh Morrissey right now. And that's not to take away everything that we have up front, because my gosh, we have a lot of talent up front. But those two are really special players right now.
No, for sure. And I think that goes to, the whole concept of what should the Jets do at the deadline. And I was even talking to my dad about it today, and he gets home and we're talking this, that, whatever about trades. And I'm like, listen, like, unless Connor Hellebuyck tells you right now and signs on the dotted line that he's staying after his contract is up, you need to go now, because you're never going to find another player like that in this market. You don't stumble upon Vezina caliber goalies who have those Vezina caliber seasons, season after season. We understand that goalies are wacko and nuts, and sometimes they'll have a crazy stand on your head season, and all of a sudden they're posting an 860 the next year. You're like, what's going on? So I fully believe in going all in while this player is the one who's sending our goal every night.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who would sit there and side with you on that for sure. So I mean, but does that mean that you want to give up your future of a draft? It's hard when you're a team that drafts well and that leans on the drafts, because you have to lean on the drafts for the trades, and free agency is just harder in general. And people will argue, well, like it's hard to bring people to the market that is Winnipeg and smaller market, Canadian market, all that stuff that seems to be going against them. Well, sure, that may be true, but also the free agent crop is just not really that great half the time. And when it is that great half the time, there seems to always be major players in it anyways. And the money just seems to be too ridiculous in the salary cap era to be signing these players in a free agent. So it's more important to draft really well. So that's the hard battle that you have. Again, Lyss, it goes back to the whole, man, I'd hate to be the GM, because it's like, do you give up another first round draft pick? It hasn't worked a few times. It got you close, really close, but it didn't work. It backfired the last time. Do you do it again? Do you get rid, or do you need that draft pick? How do you manage those assets? And that's the tough part about Chevy's job, is that you got to manage those assets, because maybe you do want to go all in this year. Maybe the West does look wide open. Maybe Colorado looks vulnerable, so you can go up there and And maybe Vegas isn't as strong as what Vegas looks to be. And Seattle's still a wild card. We don't know what's
Question
going on
mark on
there.
that one.
Yeah. So, this is probably a good year for them to go for it. But again, you're going to have to give up a lot because there's a lot of teams who are thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple more thoughts. Before we jump into that, I'm going to do a quick message here from our sponsors at Sports Interaction. So if you think you know what way it's going to go, make your bet with Sports Interaction, whether it's hockey, football, or basketball. Sports Interaction has you covered. Bet pregame, live and play, or on one of our many prop bets. Sports Interaction makes it easy to deposit, play, and cash out. Join now and see all sports betting has to offer. So want to bet? Make sure you go to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. That's sportsinteraction.com/STPN. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. I have a question for you. Every time I do that read, I like to kind of see if I can ask a question to the person that I'm with and see. It's not necessarily a betting question, but looking at the game tonight against Detroit, obviously we were talking about free agency. If you had to, put your money on which of the players that are ex-Jets that Detroit signed in the offseason this year, we got Ben Sherratt, we got Andrew Kopp. Which one do you think Detroit is going to regret signing more or less? What do you think there?
Ben Sherratt, maybe. I don't know. It's maybe the salary on Andrew Kopp is a little bit too hefty. But I love Kopp as a player. I was just such a fan of that guy. So if you want to make hockey relevant, have a hometown boy. There's certain things about Kopp in Detroit that are just, they're like, okay, well, this kind of makes sense. You can put a face, he could be the face. Now, I wouldn't say necessarily the face of the franchise because they got a lot of they got a lot of talented young players. But I just think that the fact that he is a hometown guy, they're going to love having him there. It's just that price point is a little bit hefty on a player like Kopp, which is always the worry that I had with trying to re-sign him here in Winnipeg, that he was just going to be priced pretty high for a guy who will probably play mostly third line, second line minutes. But also, Ben Sherratt, he's getting a lot of money these days. So I don't know. It's hard to say because Ben Sherratt is a good, solid defenseman, and I wish that he was on our team in so many ways too. It's just you gotta look at that price point.
Yeah, that's free agency in a nutshell too, I think. And that's we're looking at, it seems like every year people are signing people for more money in free agency and giving up more assets for guys of the trade, and every year you're like, do I even want that to be me? Do I want to be the one giving up an unprotected first for 2 rounds of Ben Sherratt? I don't know, but I think that there is a lot to happen in the next stretch. Someone mentioned in the chat, we got to beat Buffalo next game. From what I recall, I believe the Jets have a relatively easy January compared to some of the other teams that they could be playing. I think there are some, there's some Philadelphia, a couple games against Buffalo, some stuff like that in there leading up to the All-Star break and whatnot. So a lot can change in the next little bit, but a lot has time to gel. We saw some, positives come from those top 6 players tonight. Those top 2 lines looked like they were firing on all cylinders, firing at posts and 6 inches away from the net for the most part, but they were definitely firing and creating some fun chances and stuff. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how the next couple months go for this team.
Well, and we get the benefit if you're in Manitoba, because I don't know about you or anybody else, but I love these 6 o'clock games. They're just the best. The only one problem, there's one little bit of a problem with it. And it's not a problem because I love my son. But he's, at 2.5 years old, he doesn't care about hockey all that much. So what I did back in the day is I used to have a 2 TV system set up all of the time as a young man. One was for sports and one was for video games. And now as a mature, older father, I have one set up for kids shows so he can watch Cocomelon while I watch the Jets game on the little teeny tiny TV that's sitting on the top. So that's what I get to do on the East Coast games, that's what I know I'm going to be doing on Friday or Thursday and Friday night. I'll just be sitting there watching the little TV up top.
You'll have to listen to the Cocomelon.
Yeah, if you want some Cocomelon recap or any updates on Thomas the Train, we can do this all over again. You just let me know.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I think I've done some babysitting the last little bit. Is Paw Patrol, is that still a big deal? Paw
Patrol is great. Yeah, he chases on the case.
Yeah.
Now Paw Patrol's pretty good, but it's wild, the world of YouTube out there and the stuff that they see that they just end up liking. They're like, this is weird, man. But I'm not here to judge you. You're 2.5 years old, so you do you while Daddy watches the TV and takes some notes here. But
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to the road trip. These next couple East Coast games, because I think that we'll turn it around. I mean, you look at the game again tonight; they deserve to have the W beside them. It didn't happen. That's the way sports go. That's why we watch them, because it's not always going to go the way, and it's not always predictable. And that's what makes sports so special. So we were on the wrong end today of the sports luck, but I feel like the rest of the weekend, then coming back home for that one little game before they head back out on the road again, I think we're in for a good little stretch here.
Yeah, absolutely. And road trips for Brody means, less time at the Canada Life Center. I don't know, for those of you who joined in later on, we talked a little bit, Brody is QX104, the morning guy. He's the guy who's in the Jets games, who's giving away stuff and telling you what's going on and playing the games and making people guess where the thing is for a casino's card, or I don't know. I haven't been to a game in a while, so I've got the gist of kind of what goes on there.
Yeah, basically it's a lot of that stuff. A lot of sponsor reads and hanging out with fans. Actually, that's the best part of the entire thing, is that when I go, like, I don't just hide in the corner and hop on the microphone every now and then. I love to walk the concourse and see get a feel of the atmosphere that the fans bring to the building. And there's a lot of special season seat holders that I've been seeing there for, this is my 10th year doing it with the Winnipeg Jets. So, and I got a great crew. Like, if I got to take an opportunity to say that production crew works their behind off, and they are so darn passionate about their Jets and putting on a good show and making sure that those who are in the stands enjoy it. And that's one of the things that I always tell people. It's like, you have any complaints about your in-game experience, there's that fan survey. They read it every single game after the game. They want to know your feedback. They want to put on a good show for you. They're extremely, extremely passionate and very hardworking people. So I'm just lucky to be a part of that crew, because I think they do a great job with what they do every single game and what they bring every game, including DJ, lighting, camera guy, everyone from top to bottom. I think Canada Life Center staff deserves a lot of credit.
Absolutely. So for all of you who are watching this right now, if that's not telling you to get your butt out to one of the games coming up, I don't know what will. You can always check us out here, of course, on SDPN, watch our game overs. You can watch it. You can go to the game and watch it on the way home. That's what a lot of people do. That's what my parents do when they go, bless their hearts. And you'll make sure you see Brody there. So Brody, thank you so much for joining me tonight. This is a lot of fun. For those of you that are sticking around in the chat, thank you for joining as well. Make sure you give the stream a like. And if you're listening later on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you podcast, thank you so much for listening, and let us know, of course, what you think. Brody, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night.
All the best, Lyss. Thanks so much. Go Jets, go.
Powered by Sports